No, it's going to be taped. Welcome, everybody.
Well, I guess we're
I'm
on.
so happy to have you here to join us on our Elder Wisdom interview of Lillian Theophanis. And we're so happy that you're here and agreed to do this interview. And Carol stepped in. There was going to be somebody else doing the interview who was unable to, health reasons, whatever, and Carol graciously stepped in to do this. So we thank you, and this will be taped, and you can begin.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for coming, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. It was really an honor to be asked by Lillian to do this, and I'm sorry we had to change the date. When I said I would be honored to do that, just tell me the date. It was the one date where I'm going to be in Texas. So I've known Lillian for probably 20 years, since I started coming to the church here. And we've been in a small group together, so I know her pretty well, but we had so much fun practicing this interview and hearing her stories. She is just such a smart, strong, resilient, funny, beautiful inside and out woman. She's also very organized and a perfectionist. So I'm not going to have to do much this afternoon. You're going to really enjoy this. We do ask that you would hold your questions to the end, because she's got it kind of in a certain order. So I'd like to start by asking about your early years.
Okay. So I was born at San Lucas Hospital in Ponce, Puerto Rico, on the lovely tropical island of Puerto Rico. And Ponce is located near the south coast, and it's known for its historic buildings and its culture, and attracts a lot of people, a lot of tourists. My parents were Rafael Guillermo Ramirez and Lillian Diaz Ruiz. Mom worked at home. Dad was a commissioned salesman, and he served in the National Guard. My siblings, their names were Rafael, Jose, Pura, Teresa, and many years later, Willie was born. So those names were changed when we got to New York City by the schools and the hospitals. So those became, like Ralph, Joseph, Teresa, and of course Pura. They couldn't do anything with Pura. So they just changed the pronunciation to Pura, which, P-U-Ra, poor girl. She had to deal with that. You want to talk about my religious background?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I was baptized in the church down the street. We lived on the main avenue in Puerto Rico, and there was a beautiful old church called La Milagrosa, which means the miracle. And that was where my family members were all baptized, and I was baptized there too. But I was baptized twice, as a baby, and then when I was 4. And when we were in New York City and I was around 7, I asked my mom, how come they baptized me twice? And she said, well, because you were always jumping around and climbing and just so active, and we nicknamed you Cabrita, which means little goat. So I said, wow, okay, Cabrita, The goat, right. And we call our children kids. What are kids? Kids are goats. So, but I think she was teasing me. She said that maybe I was baptized again because I was so active and mischievous. So I said, oh, okay, good for me. So I lived in Ponce for only 6 years, but it left a lasting impression. I lived in a pretty little house, white with green shutters, and a veranda in the front with white balusters. And I remember that vividly. And the backyard had trees in it, fruit trees, and we also had a dovecote, which was a little house for doves. And I'll tell you later what we did with the doves. You may not like it. Each day we gathered in the dining room for the evening meal, and that was memorable. One pleasant memory was being able to eat the fruit from the trees out in the back and make soup from the doves and use their eggs too. And you know, these were the war years, so people were, you know, doing their backyard farming. So I didn't see Pop often because he was working all day and he was in the National Guard, but I would see him on weekends. And I remember him as a handsome man with a broad smile and wavy hair, and he was usually in a uniform, so he was quite an imposing figure. I didn't spend too much time with him, but he had 2 sisters. My aunts, we called them Titi Pura and Titi Teresa, and Teresa was my godmother. And they would visit us quite often in Puerto Rico, although they already lived in New York City. And one day, I had already gone to bed, and I heard music outside the house, like a guitar playing and people singing. So I asked my mother about it, and she said, well, some of the young men in the neighborhood found out that the aunts were visiting again, and they were serenading them. Wow, that's cool.
Can you tell us a little about your mom?
Okay, so I spent a lot of time with Mom. She was a pretty petite woman with blue eyes and blonde hair, and she liked to go to the movies, and she would usually walk me to school, which was quite a distance away, so we really spent a lot of time together just seeing the sights, and sometimes we would go up to the main square, which was a double square. It was unique in that way. It was twice the size of a regular town square, and in the middle was the cathedral, and there was a fountain with lions, stone lions around it, and there was a very historic red and white fire station. It was just the most beautiful fire station I've ever seen in my life, and all of the equipment in there was painted red and black, and it was all shiny, and it was like a museum, really. And then she would take me to the theater called La Perla, the Pearl, and I remember even age 4, 5, 6, we would go to the movies together, and we would see movies that featured this Mexican singer who was very handsome and had an operatic voice, and he rode a white horse, and I fell in love. His name was Jorge Negrete, and to this day I'm in love with him.
Sounds like that movie Coco.
Yeah, right.
So you were in Puerto Rico then, and
Right.
started school there, right?
Yes, started school at Liceo Ponceño from kindergarten through the 2nd grade. I was in kindergarten a few weeks, and the teacher realized that I already knew how to read, so why not send her off to 1st grade? So I was only in kindergarten for a few weeks, and I wish that she had just let me stay there, because it would have been a lot more fun. As soon as you get into 1st grade, it gets to be work, right? So, but I knew how to read, because my mother used to read the daily newspaper to me, little bits and pieces, and she would, with her finger, she'd show me the words, and I would pick up the reading. So, sometime with my older brother Ralph, because he had a special situation. Ralph and I would go, Mom would take us to the beach near La Guancha, which is a marine center, and we'd go by ferry. And we would spend a morning collecting seashells and tiny crabs. Otherwise, Ralph could not travel very much. He was 2 years older than me, but even then I saw that he was different. And he had a limp on the left side, and his left hand was a little bit like that, and his left eyelid drooped a little. And when I asked my mom about it, she said that she had had a very difficult labor, lasted 3 days, at home. And finally, they took her to the hospital. I guess she didn't want to go to the hospital. She was really scared. And so they finally had to use forceps. And they told my father, you know, one of them may not survive. And they asked him, what do you want us to do? And he said, I want my wife to live. You know, as much as I want the baby to live, my mom can have other children. And of course, there was a religious component in there because you're supposed to be willing to give up your life for your child to be
remember
born.
those days.
And we were Catholic, so that created a problem within the family. Judgment type of problem. Okay, so.
Where was your dad then?
So my dad was with us then. You know, he was in the National Guard, so he came home every weekend. So.
But then he left
Yes, but.
during the war, right?
But I just want to say a little more about my brother, that even though he was brain damaged and he had grand mal epilepsy by the time he was 4, parts of his brain really worked well. Like, he really loved singing. And I think singing is a big thing in our family. I've noticed that there's a lot of us that really have a very special thing about singing. And so he would memorize the words to the songs, and he knew who sang the song, who wrote the song. So it's kind of interesting that even though you're brain damaged, you can sometimes have parts of your brain that are working really well. But he could never go to school because he couldn't really, because of the epilepsy and because he really couldn't learn a lot of things. He had to be home all the time. Okay, so the war years, that came on us
Where
pretty
was Dad
quickly.
then?
By the time I was 6 years old, my dad had enlisted in the U.S. Army and was on his way to the Japanese theater of World War II. And one day in 2nd grade, my teacher brought me a little card. It was like a telegram, but it was glossy, and it had like a bunny and an Easter egg. So he had sent me an Easter card from the ship that he was on, and it said, I love you, and I hope I can see you soon. And then we didn't hear from him again for months and months and months because he was in the war effort. So that was a sad thing. And then, little did I know that in a couple of months, I would be on a military plane to New York City with my family because my mother did not want to stay in Puerto Rico. She wanted to move to New York City near where he was still at the Army base, so she could spend some time with him before we left. And she just didn't want to stay in Puerto Rico anymore. So we moved to New York City, Washington Heights, and I would not see the little house on Calle Guadalupe again for many years, not until I retired when I was 65. So, and you know, I never realized it over the years, but that really left a hole in my heart. That being yanked away from that beautiful place that I was familiar with. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that kind of thing.
Yeah, for a 6-year-old, that must have been a big trip and a bit of a culture
Big trip,
shock.
yeah, noisy plane. My grandmother was holding my baby sister in her lap, and she started to fall asleep, and baby started to slip away onto the floor. So little things like that, you know. And then when we got to Grand Central Station, a train is pulling up, and I could see our aunts waiting for us outside at the train. And my sister, Teresa, yanks away from my mom and runs to the other door and goes out that way with a bunch of people. And like, we were really terrified. We thought, oh my God, we're going to lose our little Teresa. But the aunt spotted the snowsuit that they had sent us. And so they recognized that this is one of our kids, and they yanked her up. And that's the way Teresa was all her life. She was always the one who would, do something unexpected that you wouldn't be ready for. So then my brother Joseph and I settled in with my aunts, and the rest of the family settled in with my mother's brother and sister-in-law. And I got to visit my cousins a few times, and although it was hard being away from Mom for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was an adjustment, for sure. And then I started attending Cabrini, and not long after I started riding the bus to Cabrini, I met this little girl, and she told me that there was an apartment available on 177th Street, which is the same street my aunts lived on. So I was very excited. I told Mom and Dad about it, and they applied, and they paid $500 for the furniture that was left there. And the first night, we couldn't sleep because there were bed bugs in the mattresses. So we had to get rid of those and buy new ones, which we probably couldn't afford at the time. We just paid like $500 for furniture. So then I started grammar school, and it was Mother Cabrini's 2nd through 8th grades. And it was a unique experience. Not only was it cold in November, but I had only recently experienced my first time with snow. And that was when I was downstairs. My mom had sent me downstairs with a little pail and shovel like you use on the beach. And I was like, testing it out. And all of a sudden I hear a voice behind me, and it was my German landlady. And she was just trying to be friendly, and I got scared, and I went like that, and I threw snow in her face. And boy, was she mad. So that first day in school, get off the bus, I see these big wrought iron doors, and they only have one side open, and we're kind of filing through, and I don't know what the reason was, but I see this patch of white snow with no footprints on it. It was about 3 feet deep, and that's where I'm heading. I don't know. So all of a sudden I hear my name called, and it was the principal at the top of the steps, and she's saying, "Lillian, don't do that." Well, I was already in the snowdrift. I had to get pulled out.
In trouble already.
But it was embarrassing, like my first time with the principal, and I had to be reprimanded, really. But once I met my new 2nd grade teacher, Miss O'Terry, I knew I was going to be okay, because she was very sweet, and she hooked me up with 3 students, Jean Dart, Celine Gary, and Dorothy Bosenberg, and they were supposed to teach me English. And within 6 months, they had succeeded. I knew enough English that I could get by. And then Dorothy, she was my first close friend. We were friends through our entire grammar school years. She lived only a few blocks away from me, so we would get together and either go down to the train station, or we would walk 27 blocks in the nice weather and go to Cabrini that way. So we spent a lot of time together, Dorothy and I. I just talked to her recently, and she's still just as sweet and kind as ever. Okay.
How were your grades?
My grades were very good. In the beginning, of course, I got a D in English, but all my other grades were A's and B's until I got to 4th grade, and my vision went bad, but I didn't say anything to anybody. I couldn't copy the notes off the blackboard anymore, and I guess the teacher must have noticed, because my grades started to drop. So they contacted my family, and my godmother took me to a military hospital, and they got me glasses. So I turned out to be quite myopic, and I had some other problem with my eyes that was pretty bad. So I wore the glasses from the age of 12 until just a few years ago, when I had my cataracts removed, and they did a special little thing, and now I can see like when I was a baby.
It sounds like Cabrini was a really good school.
It was wonderful. They really appreciated both the sciences and the arts, and they would have special events for us every year. Right on from the very beginning, we were involved in plays. We would have singing opportunities. There was an oratory program that was one of the best in the city. And I was not in it, but I would go listen to the girls, and some of those girls won awards because they were so good. And so the arts were really important to them. We would have about 4 classic plays every year, and we would also have, at Christmas, we would have that ceremony where you don't hear speaking, but it shows the entire tableau of the birth of Christ, with angels and peasants and, everybody got involved in that. I was even one of the peasants. Very fitting. So, what else?
Then your dad came back from the war and something exciting happened.
Okay. I think I have to turn the page. Okay, so Dad came back from World War II, and he was able to visit us on weekends from Fort Dix, and he tried to start an import-export business with a partner, and that fell through. And I think he may have started going to college, Hunter College, to learn the insurance business so he could have a business of his own without depending on a partner. And, but then, and he couldn't find a job. So the war, the talk about war in Korea started happening, and he was in the reserve. So he decided, well, I guess I have no other choice but to go back and to go to Korea because, and he knew a lot about transportation. That's what he was in charge. He was in the upper echelons of the Army. He knew how to put together a program of transporting goods here and there. And so when he was in Korea, that's what he was doing. He was in charge of transporting goods and all that kind of thing. So there he went off again. He wasn't home for very long, and he was gone. And I remember my mom standing at the window. It was raining, and she was crying. And just a few years ago, talking to my godmother, I found out that he had called her from the station before he left, and he was crying. He didn't want to leave, but he had no choice. And those are the things that happen to military families sometimes. You don't spend a lot of time together. So, about 9 months later, Willie was born. And it really helped the family a lot because he was a delightful baby, and he was always making us laugh. And that kind of helped ease the pain of not having Dad around.
Mm-hmm. What was New York City like in those days, your neighborhood?
Okay, so my neighborhood, 177th Street between Amsterdam and Audubon, was a very diverse neighborhood. We had families of every nation that you can think of. And we were one of the first Puerto Rican families that moved to the block. I was spared most of the verbal abuse. I was called a spick once, and I didn't know what it meant. But it sounded like it wasn't something good. So I kind of stayed away from that little girl after that. But I think I was spared because my school was so far away. It wasn't the parochial school just a few blocks down the street. It was a private girls' school, quite a distance away, and I would get on the school bus to get there quite often. So, I wasn't exposed to that kind of harassment like some other people had been. But I did become aware of discrimination when the first black family moved to our neighborhood. And my siblings and I befriended them, and we became close friends. But we also knew that they were looked down upon by some of the other people in the neighborhood. And we didn't understand that. We didn't know anything about the history of what happened in the South and in the North as well, really. And but the father of the family, Red Thompson, he rescued my older brother Ralph, when he tried to run away from home and cross the street to go visit grandmother. And the kid was 13 by then, and he threw him over his shoulder and brought him back home. Brought him up our stairs. And then another time, he rescued my younger sister Pura, excuse me, and she had, you know, those coal chutes that they removed the bars, the railings, and they put the coal chute down into the building. Mm-hmm. Well, they had driven away and left the railings removed, and Pura was doing hand over the hand on the railings, and she gets there, and whoops, she falls downstairs quite a distance, and ended up behind the stairs. And we couldn't find her. So Rhett came over and started, you know, nosing around, and he heard her whimpering. And he went downstairs and found her and brought her back.
With coal dust all over, probably.
No, I don't think so. So, Pop did return for good, we thought, after Korea. And that was in 1952. I was in my, let's see, that would have been freshman, sophomore year. And he came with beautiful gifts, but he also came with the news that he would divorce us. He was going to divorce Mom. And he came with my uncle, who never had visited us before, so we knew something was up. So we found out from Mom that he was going to divorce us, and I tried to talk him out of it. The next day I went to my aunt's house. In the elevator, I tried to talk him out of it, but he said, no, you don't understand right now, but this has to happen. And I cried. You know, it was so sad. And then there was a component of being a Catholic again, where divorce was considered a sin in those days, right? So I shared that with Dorothy because I felt, you know, like, this is so bad. My parents are getting divorced, you know, like, ugh. That was actually the first time I really understood what divorce might mean. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't see him very often. He would come on weekends, but I became estranged from him because I was angry at him and I didn't understand why this was happening. And, but then, you know, I had to go to school and make my grades, and I just kind of put it to the back of my mind. I'm really good at putting stuff in little boxes in my brain. And I guess that's what I did. So the next few years at Cabrini were pretty happy ones because I put that away and I just decided to do my thing. So the early teen years became the most fun years of my life up until then. When I was 13, I met a girl named Awilda Cordero. She was a very lively, happy-go-lucky young lady, and she had a crush on a young man who belonged to a small group on the block, and she wanted me to meet them, so she took me to the Highbridge Pool, which is just a few blocks away, and she introduced me to these young boys, and they were very nice. They were very respectful, and in all the years I knew these kids, they were really wonderful boys. So, but there was one boy who had red hair and freckles, and he pushed me into the pool, and I got chlorine water up my nose. I went under, and I came up splurting water, and I looked at him, and I said, I do not like him. Well, turns out, a few years later, when I was 16, we started going steady, and when we were 26, we got married. So,
no, he was not Puerto Rican.
He was Greek.
Greek.
I thought he was Irish when I first met him, but it turns out he was a redheaded,
Oh,
freckled,
wow. So that's where
Greek.
Theophanis comes from.
Yeah, right. And, I wanted to tell you about the boys. So we got to be fast friends, and they wore leather jackets, garrison belts with a large buckle made out of metal, and these special hats that they wore. So if you think that, what's his name? Elvis Presley invented that look, this was long before Elvis Presley, let me tell you.
The DA.
The DA, the rolled up jeans, and they didn't smoke though. That was a good thing. So we used to spend a lot of time down at Riverside Park. Riverside Park was a very special place to go, and on the bridge. And then they got their special English bike, so we would, like the girls would hop on, and we would go across the George Washington Bridge into New Jersey. We did a lot of fun stuff together. Mm. And they stayed my friends forever, really. And some of them are still alive, and I still talk to them.
Oh, nice.
So that was really a very nice thing that happened to me.
And then high school. What did you like to do in high school?
Well, my favorite subjects were biology, Spanish, history, French, civics, art, and gym. That's almost all of them. Mm-hmm. But I disliked Latin. And Mother Eleanor pronounced my name incorrectly every single time. But it was mandatory, and I knew that it was important to take it. So I had 4 full years of Latin. And I don't regret it because it was a good foundation for learning the sciences and taxonomy and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So Cabrini was a school of distinction. It was really one of the best schools in the city. It was well known for its trophy-winning marching band, a fine basketball team, and the cheering squad. I was on the cheering squad for a couple of years. The fact that it taught sciences and the arts very well, and for its superior public speaking program, which I told you about before. Even our commencement exercises were very popular because they were so beautiful, and people would come from the neighborhood, in addition to the parents. Every year, neighborhood people would come just to listen to the songs and to hear the oratory. And it was also in a very beautiful setting. Cabrini had its own campus, and we had like a cement walkway that surrounded this huge peony garden, and the graduation was in a field right next to that. So everything was so pretty there, really, really nice.
And your senior class photo was kind of special.
Yes, yes.
Where was that?
The senior class
Photo.
Okay.
At the Met?
Oh, the one at the Met. Okay.
Oh.
Yes, let's talk about that. Moments to Remember was the theme song of our senior year. And one of my most memorable moments was the evening when my senior class had our photo taken as we lined up along the grand staircase at the Met. And we were there taking our turn as the official hostesses for the tournament of orators, in which some of our students would participate. And it was just such a thrill to be there in our long gowns and gloves, white gloves, and looking pretty and lining the stairway. Well, I mean, we looked forward to that from the time that we were in 8th grade because we had heard about it. And we had seen the yearbooks, and we said, oh my God, someday we're going to be at the Met, Mm-hmm. Very exciting. So that was an honor. Then we had well, I already told you about my sad days with Dad and the divorce, so I'll go back into that. And then it was over. We, Dorothy and I, we continued on into high school, and we graduated, and then it was over, and it was odd. I don't know if it was just unique to me, because I lived in a different neighborhood from some of the other girls who were, their families were better off. Maybe they saw each other after high school, but I never saw a single student after that. And we were like sisters, from the time, from 2nd grade. And that was heartbreaking, let me tell you. I ran into Dorothy once in the subway, but we were all busy going to colleges and schools and things like that. Now, I worked for a year to make enough money to afford going to City College. And my first year was traumatic. I was competing against pre-med students, and I was taking biology and the full course of study, and I knew this is not going to work out for me. So I switched to the social sciences for the next year, and then after that I did fine. And they were so interesting anyway. You know, anthropology and all that stuff, I loved it. And it turned out to be really my thing, where I really didn't know. I thought I wanted to go into biology and science, and that was not the place to be. Although, I have to say, years later, when I worked for the Conservation District, all of that came handy, you know, the biology and all that kind of stuff. So, yes?
How about your summer camp
My what?
experience? Your counseling in the Catskills. That was a significant
yeah. That was a
part
nice
of your
thing that came
education.
out of my second year at CCNY. I joined the Catholic organization there, trying to think, Newman Club. And they ran a little program during the summer where they would send students to be camp counselors in the Catskills. And that sounded really appealing to me. So I applied, and I was able to go. And really, that was a good experience because it helped me open up, you know. It took me out of the city with the tall buildings and let me see what the natural world was like in the United States, you know. This was upper New York State, Delaware River and all of that. And I was just entranced. Just the drive going up to the camp, you know, I thought, oh my Lord, we stopped at the Delaware River and it had these beautiful stones in there, and my mom, and we would sit there and take pictures, and it was really wonderful, a really terrific experience. I met people who were different than me. They were from upper New York State and other places, and very nice young ladies, really nice. I also got a crush while I was there on one of the boys' what do you call them? Counselors. And he happened to be a seminarian, by the way. And I got a crush on him. and he was very attentive and nice, and he wasn't really sure if he wanted to be a priest. But by the end of that summer, I knew that he was interested in somebody else, so I cried for 4 hours on my way home to New York City.
Aw.
And I mean, I was sobbing. Very, very embarrassing. I'm glad that the bus made a lot of noise.
So your schooling eventually led you to a professional life in conservation.
Right. So, yes. So, this woman that I had made friends with when Chris and I and Lynn moved to Vestal, she was working for a conservation district. I didn't know it. I didn't find this out until sometime later. But she called me up one day after we had moved out of the house in Vestal, and she wanted to know if I was interested in a job, part-time, 8 hours a week, and that she knew that I was interested in the environment. So I said, okay, I'll check it out. And I got hired. And then, of course, within a year, it was a full-time job, and it went from executive director to district manager within just a few years. And I got a lot of training at Penn State University to learn all about farming and the soil erosion and the harm it does to the waters and what could be done about it, how we could help farmers do best management practices, and also work with loggers and anyone who disturbed the soil, really, especially townships. So, and that was those were very early days for the Conservation District. They had only been around for like 40 years. And so they didn't have a lot of programs, but within the next 10 years, with the help of the state, I brought in grants and other programs that would address soil erosion and the cows getting in the stream, okay, which is obviously not a good thing, and we would get thousands of dollars to help farmers do what needed to be done on the farm to keep the cows out of the stream, fence them out, build a proper pad for them to be, and it also improved the health of the cows. So it was a good thing all around. And those programs got very popular. And today, those programs, we have like, our budget used to be in the thousands, now it's over $1 million, several $1 million. And it's a very, very responsible office. Every conservation district, every county has a conservation district, but a lot of people don't know about us because we don't toot our own horns enough. And we really should let people know, all the wonderful things, because students and families can also benefit from it, especially with the changes that are going on in our environment.
For sure.
Okay.
I think I got us a little bit out of order, Lil.
It's okay.
Because you got that job with conservation after you had already married the redheaded boy that pushed you in the pool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was, what year was that you and Chris got married, and how did you wind up in Binghamton?
So we got married in the city in 1963. Within a year, we had a beautiful little girl named Lynn. And she was a delight, but she had a mind of her own right from the beginning.
No.
Yeah, if she didn't want to leave the swing set, she let us know it. That we would get into the elevator, into the building, and she would drop her whole weight. I was holding her like this, and she would just drop. We ended up taking her to the hospital to put her arm back in place. But she was delightful. She had many, many charms.
And why Binghamton?
Why did we pick Binghamton? Okay, so while I was a camp counselor, I had visited Binghamton. And Chris had also visited Binghamton when he would drive up to visit me at camp on his motorcycle. And we had liked it a lot. And we thought maybe someday we'd like to live there. So when he applied for his, what do you call it, postgraduate, no, wait a minute. Yeah, when he applied to continue his college, because he had been away in the Army in Germany, and he had only done 2 years, so he decided to finish school at another university away from New York City. We decided New York City wasn't a good place for us to live because of, we were walking with Lynn one day, she had on a white snowsuit, and we see these black things landing all over her, and it was soot. The soot was coming out of the chimneys and landing on her, and we thought, this isn't really a good place for us to raise Lynn. So he was approved to go to Harper College, it was called in those days. And so that's how we ended up in Binghamton. And when we went looking for apartments, we found this beautiful, it was a house, a 2-story house with a bay window, and it was right near Ross Park on a dead-end street. What could be better? So that's where we lived for a couple of years. And then from there we moved to Vestal. And that's where Lynn made her first little boy friend. She was only like 3 or 4.
How about, how did you come to UUCB?
Okay, so when we first came to Binghamton, we joined the Naturalist Club, and we met June and Roland Dawson, also Harriet Marcy. And June and Roland were attending here. And they said, we think you'd like this church. So we came, we liked it, we stayed. We even taught a course, an environmental course to the kids, hands-on kind of stuff. And we really enjoyed that for quite a long time.
So from Catholic to UUCB, just
like that. And I have to say that it was years before I shed my, the things about being a Catholic that I didn't like, that I dealt with those, but there was still some guilt involved. And I was worried that I really hadn't made the right decision for the girls, that maybe I should have let them go to Catholic school since I had such a good experience. But that didn't happen. And little by little, I got accustomed to the more liberal ways of thinking, and I accepted them, most of them, not all. Oh, and Harry Thor and Iris, and well, she was Dorothy when I met her, but she changed her name to Iris. During the 60s, she created the first consciousness raising group for women in this whole area. And she had changed her name to Iris, which I thought was odd, but she liked it better. It's a pretty name. So Harry and Iris had a big impact on me and our family.
So Chris was going to school at Harper
Right.
at the time, and you were working,
And I was working part-time.
and
At
you
first.
moved to Chocolat.
Yes. So we left that house in Vestal, which was along the river. We loved it there. It was really a beautiful place to live. But we moved to Vestal. We spent the summer at the trailer of a couple of friends of ours on Schooley Pond in Susquehanna County, PA. And it was a wonderful summer. We had Lynn's grandmother, Yaya, red-headed, freckle-faced Yaya, with a great sense of humor. She was with us living in this little trailer. And I would take Lynn for walks and hear a sound in the tree, look up and see a great horned owl sitting up there. And I had all my violets with me, and my violets never looked better. It was like a rainy summer, but just light rain. And violets loved it. They just thrived.
And you had also a golden retriever with 8 puppies?
Yes, yes, yes. So when we moved to the farmhouse with the help of this same couple who found this, rental opportunity for us, we lived up on the hill at the farmhouse, and we had a golden retriever named Sean, and she had 8 puppies, and we traded 4 of those puppies for a horse that had been used as a trotter in Afton. And it was really fun to have a horse, wasn't it, Lynn? My girls just loved the horse. I've got pictures of them sitting on the horse, and even Kristen, who was quite little, I have a picture of her lying on the horse, throwing her arm back like that, and her dad holding her on for dear life. So one thing that we did at the farmhouse house was that Harriet Marcy invited the Naturalist Club members to see our farm and go up to the pond and look for snakes and things like that. So we did, and there was a spread in the newspaper, full-page spread, and one of the pictures was Lynn holding a snake in her hand. two snakes in your hand.
And then at some point you built a house of your own.
Yes, a few years later, we decided that we wanted to have a house of our own, and we talked to the next door neighbor, the farmers down the road, and when we had first driven up to the farmhouse, we had seen on the right-hand side a beautiful apple tree, huge apple tree, just laden with flowers, and looked back, and then we could see practically the whole valley from there. And we just remarked to each other, wouldn't it be nice to have a house there? Well, sure enough, the neighbors, we got to be their friends, and we babysat for them, and they liked us, and they offered us a piece of land, which is where we built our roundhouse. And we got the idea for the roundhouse from a mechanics magazine, Mechanics Illustrated or something like that, and we found out that there was indeed a roundhouse that had been built in Susquehanna County. We went to visit it, we liked it, and so we adopted some of the ideas and we built our own house ourselves with the help of our children. I remember being on a stone boat with the girls, and we would go along the stone walls that had fallen down, because every field was lined with stone in those days. And we would pick up the stones, put them on the stone boat, take them back home, and we built our foundation from those stones. Saved us a lot of money. We never even had a mortgage on that house.
Wow.
I think it cost us something like $21,000, and we just paid it off. as we could, not right away, but, you know, it wasn't a mortgage. So we owned the house almost from the beginning. That's a kind of an unusual thing. And it's a very unique house. It's 1,000 square feet, so therefore it has 14 sides, 8 by 8 each section. And I remember standing there after Chris would prefabricate that section of wall, and I would get on one end, he would get on the other, and we'd lift it up, put it up against the framing, and he'd tap it in place.
Wow.
I mean, he had classes at the school that he went to in New York City, Brooklyn Tech, and they had actually built a building inside the building. So he had some skills, but I knew nothing about building. And it was very interesting. Like when we built the flooring for the second floor, it was a very light wood, and it was a very hot day. And by the time we got finished tapping it in place, I had a humongous headache, like the worst headache I'd ever had. It was not easy. But then we got help with putting the roof on. That part was hard because we wanted to have a cantilevered roof, or whatever you call this kind of roof. And that was going to be more difficult, so we got help from friends. And all our friends were very, very nice. They wanted to be involved in the project, you know.
Nice. And you still live there?
I still live there.
Nice. You were very well traveled, I think, too, toting the girls around to
Yeah, in the States.
quite a bit of the States.
We took Lynn when she was 2nd and when she was 4 across the States. The first time we were on our own, we had just gotten a new Chevy Travelall, and we traveled along the Blue Ridge Mountains and down to the southern states and across to Texas. And we saw the Gila Cliff dwellings and all of the national parks we stopped at. Excuse me. Must be important, right?
Well, some of that early travel involved some research that your husband was doing
Yes,
too,
so
right?
the second trip involved, Chris was an assistant to the professor. He had an assistantship, and he was going to help the students there, the geology students, go to, what college did I say, Ohio State, pick up another bunch of students and their professor, and then go onto the Uinta Mountains in Utah. And that was a really high elevation. We could really feel the difference up there. And one experience that I had there was trying to take a bath in the stream, which was absolutely frigid. And another time I was trying to cook a pot roast at that elevation, and it was taking like hours longer than it should, and we were expecting guests. And there was a peacock that lived on the property, and it would just strut around with its, beautiful plumage showing, and that was weird, like who would ever expect to find a peacock up in the Uinta Mountains? Yeah, so we really enjoyed that. And Lynn may not remember a lot of those trips, but I think she had fun. She seemed to be having fun. We also had our cat, Sonny, who was named after the university, S-U-N-Y. And he got away from us a couple of times, and the park ranger got mad at us. And we had to stay an extra night until Sonny got back, and then we could leave.
Adventures.
Yes.
Well, I admire your lifelong passion for and continued commitment to the environment, which defined your career. You want to tell us a little bit more about that
Sure.
passion you still have?
Yes, I learned how to apply for grants so I could do little projects. And one of the projects was I hired a group of students to help me fix the trails going up to the waterfalls at Salt Springs Park. Any of you have been there? So, the soil was getting eroded, the roots were getting exposed under these giant hemlocks that were many hundreds of years old, and we were worried about their health. So we created thank you mans to take the water off the roads, and then we created trails, 3 different trails, and then the crew chief had a special skill. He used a chainsaw to cut the hemlock logs that were lying along the road and notch the seat into them, and then people could just sit there so they could listen to the waterfalls and, you know, watch the birds and just commune with nature. It was really, really,
It's a beautiful
really nice.
spot.
That was one of the projects that I did with grants. And then many years later, at the park again, I got $14,000 from another organization that I belonged to for like 45 years. And we were about to break up the organization because our funding was going away, but I had this $14,000, and I talked to the board of Still Springs, and I said, why don't we put a riparian buffer, which is a vegetated buffer of trees and shrubs, along the stream, because it'll keep erosion down and it'll provide habitat. And they liked it. So unfortunately, we had that huge storm. It was a 500-year frequency storm a few years ago. And so we had to wait a couple of years before we could use the money. And hanging on to government money for too long is risky. But somehow I managed to, you know, keep communicating with these folks at state level and say, look, we're going to do this. We just need to wait because now we have to replace the bridge at the park and repair the stream that divided into 3 parts. But eventually we did. The first year we planted 700 seedlings with the help of volunteers like the master gardeners at Penn State University, our local office. And we had other volunteers, and we got those 700 trees sheltered, and they did really well. And any trees that died, we replaced. And then over the years, we were offered more trees by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and the Master Gardeners and other groups, because they knew that we meant business, and we would take care of them, which is one of the things. If you don't take care of those trees forever, you know, at least until they get big enough so that the deer aren't gonna chomp them down. That's what the shelters were for, to protect them from the animals.
And you're still on the board.
I'm still on the board, yeah. Retired in 2004, went on the board a year later, and in 2018 I became the chairwoman. And then I did that for 4 years. But now I'm back to being a non-voting associate director because the commissioners made a mistake and they didn't put me back on as a board member like they were supposed to, which made me really angry and upset. But then I said, you know what, it's okay. I get a chance to rest. Somebody else becomes the chairman. He's younger than I am. That's the way to go. You don't want to stay too long as a chairman of a committee or a group because, you know, you need new blood. It's important.
Well, that's a lot to be proud of, but I think you have something you're even more proud of, and that's your girls.
Oh, well, yes, that's the thing I'm most proud of. My girls have been successful. They've worked really hard. They're loving, kind people, and they have lots of friends who love them. And I have all kinds of details about their accomplishments, but within the time constraints, I think maybe we'll let that go for now.
And how are your brothers and sisters doing?
My brothers and sisters all married, and they had mostly good marriages. There were some divorces, there were children. My youngest brother moved to Texas, and he had a family there, 2 families there actually. And he passed away about 5 years ago. So the baby went first. The baby died first. Well, no, actually my oldest brother died first because he had epilepsy. We sent him to an institution when he was 12, that was heartbreaking. He couldn't stay at home anymore. He was too strong, and he would grab my mother by the hair and not let go. And my mother had like 4 other children at the time, and so the decision was made to put him in an institution. But it was so far away, and we couldn't. In those days, traveling that distance, it would take like 7 hours, with kids, it was just impossible. So we only got to see him a few times, and when he was 32, he developed pneumonia 3 times, and he passed away. So I've always had that pain in my heart for him, that he was without his family all those years. That's very, very emotional for me.
Well, we're running out of time.
Okay.
I'm wondering, are you willing to share your age with people?
Oh, I think everybody knows I'm 85.
I bet they don't. But you're doing well, health-wise.
You know,
and
I have to say,
you got lots of energy.
the last few years have been challenging because I have a tendency to fall. I don't know how to walk. I know how to march. I don't know how to walk. And so I would trip, and so I have finally figured out why I trip, and I practice really hard not to trip again because it hurts. It hurts there, it hurts there, it hurts everywhere. Oh, remember, Lynn? It hurt back there at one time. So I have fallen a few times and banged my head pretty bad and gotten stitches, and I'm just trying real hard to stay upright. Everybody tells me, Lillian, stay upright.
Right. I guess if there's any questions from the audience?
I just had a question. You were here when the church split?
Yes.
Repeat the question.
When the church split?
Yeah.
She was a
She
member.
wants to know when was I here when the church split? And yes, I was, right up until and through that period of time. I even remember when we invited the hog farmers to stay at our church, which I think may have been a bone of contention with some people. They basically squatted in our building, and then I think they overstayed their welcome. And then there were other issues involved with Harry's, I guess...
Activism?
Activism, yes. And so the church did split, and that was when I decided I don't want to be here anymore because a lot of my friends have left. And it took a few years for that to repair itself, but I think it had left a permanent mark on our congregation. I really do. So, does that answer your question?
Other questions?
No? Nobody has any more questions?
Well, thank you, Lillian,
Yay.
for sharing
I do have
that.
some pictures if anybody wants to see. I'd be glad to show you a couple of pictures that I have, if you like. Okay, so here's a picture of the sandstorm days. You want to pass that around? That's one of the reasons why I keep doing what I'm doing. That was during
The Dust Bowl.
Dust Bowl days.
Yeah, but this was taken there.
That was taken by a very famous artist many years ago.
But where is it?
Oh, Kansas or somewhere like that. Yeah. But the dust did reach Washington DC. That was when the politicians finally decided to do something about it. And that's one of the reasons the conservation districts were created, to help to address that.
That was accomplished.